Welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, a local news anchor here with Arizona's Family in Phoenix and the host of a community book club since 2019. So this is a show for all people who love books and are heavy into the bookish life, or for those of you who don't want to read but want to pretend you do. You can listen to this podcast and start talking about the books you've most recently read. Impress your friends. I don't care. It's a no judgment zone as long as you subscribe. I'm joined in studio by our super producer and crazy voracious reader, Margaret Stewart. Hi, Margaret. We'll get some reading recommendations and some reference points from Margaret in a moment with Margaret a little later on. But now I am so thrilled to welcome our guest, our VIP, Miss Kristin Hannah, the wildly talented, best-selling, millions of times over author of more than 20 novels, most recently The Four Winds, which was our Olivia's Book Club pick, and we just loved it. We loved the discussion. And by the way, I should say for reference, that was the only time in the course of our book club that we have read the same author 2 times. So I guess having that cathartic, ugly cry that we experienced for the Nightingale made us a glutton for punishment, and we wanted back at it to have even more. So I think a lot of emotional growth we have to thank Kristin Hannah for. So Kristin, thank you so much for being here. It is a great honor and pleasure to be able to speak to you again. And my goodness, congratulations, you've done it again. How do you keep churning out such compelling work?
Oh, thank you so much. It is fabulous to be here. I really just love what I do. And I love, writing novels about, strong, resilient women who triumph over, incredibly difficult odds. And I love being able to sort of return women to their rightful place in the historical landscape and, remind us and our daughters and our granddaughters of some of the amazing women who have come before us.
And the way that you do highlight these women, obviously we go on an incredible journey, and we do find a little bit of ourselves, hopefully, along the way, or most often maybe I'm reading and saying, gosh, I don't think I could ever tap into that incredible strength. Elsa was such a unique character that seemed like we knew her so early on, largely because of the strained and kind of painful dynamics of her family. So when you first conceived of Elsa and pictured her, how did she begin?
Elsa is a funny story, actually. She is probably my favorite character that I've ever created. And, when you're talking 24 books, that's a lot of characters. So I really fell in love with this woman. But interestingly enough, she was not in the genesis of this novel. It was not supposed to be about Elsa. And so I did, a year's worth of research, and then I did a year writing the first draft, and there was no Elsa. And so I was at the very end of the first draft when she walked on, she was a bit character who walked on to the piece. And I just knew instantly, and she had that same backstory that you're talking about. She had come from this difficult family and had low self-esteem and felt that she had very little worth. And there was just something about that really resonated with me, because I always think how deeply we are affected by the things we hear about ourselves when we're young. And how those, they're like burrs, they stick with you. And if you've been given, I think, an unfair or unreasonable sense of self early on, it takes real grit and determination to overcome that and discover that you are not what you were told that you were.
Wow, that just blows my mind, because we hear from authors oftentimes, especially if they're giving advice to somebody who maybe has an aspiration for writing a story down, and you say, write it, and it's a draft. And we look at you and we think, oh, you're probably writing a meticulously perfect draft 1, and you're just pretending, wink, wink, draft 2 will be really different, but there's no draft 2. But that's incredible that these characters almost live in your imagination, but sort of in an alternate universe, and kind of can come in and take over, and you realize they were always meant to be there.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that is important, I think, for new writers to sort of understand is the writing of a novel is every bit as much a process as the reading of it. It's a journey of discovery. And, one of the skills that we have to develop as writers is to, when do we follow something that we hadn't planned on? And when do we ignore, those voices? And I tend to listen to them and give them a chance and, see how it goes. For example, in the Nightingale, the entire first draft, Vian didn't exist. It was only Isabel's story. Wow. And it wasn't until I finished the first draft that I realized that the story was too isolated. I needed to go bigger.
Wow, that is incredible. I'm learning so much at this moment. I'm super excited. I had highlighted a little passage that really sort of spoke to me about Elsa. And it was, Elsa couldn't even cry. Heartache had been a part of her life so long, it had become as familiar as the color of her hair or the slight curve in her spine. And that was from page 117. And it's so gripping and so heartbreaking, because you do learn that she has just learned to be disappointed, and yet out of that she has found such resilience and such appreciation for the people who do give her kindness in her life, like when Rafe disappoints her parents that she inherits through him.
Absolutely. And I think, what really ultimately sort of creates and defines Elsa is motherhood. And, it is through motherhood that she is forced to put aside how she feels about herself, because now what's important is who she is for her children. And I think that's such an important, sort of message, is this reminder that motherhood is its own definer of character. And it is, for many of us, the reason that we become warriors, because it's easier sometimes for women to fight for others than to fight for ourselves.
And you're thinking a generation ahead in the world that your children are going to inherit from you, and everything kind of has a broader scope once you become a mom. And you can see that with Elsa. Loretta is a very unique character. And of course you want to just shake her, because she is every teenager that anybody has ever been or known. And we all look back on our behaviors oftentimes with regret. Had we understood the context of the challenges of parenting or adulthood, maybe we would have behaved differently or been more grateful or been more patient. But she really has an incredible arc. So and many of our readers actually took away that this book was more about Loretta's story than Elsa's. So how did she come into your storytelling picture?
Well, she was the original character. It was originally Loretta's story, and as an adult. So, when I gave the book to Elsa, I still loved Loretta. I had loved her all along. And I was really looking for, because there was so much adversity, and so much, the dust storms and the poverty and the drought. There were so many things going on that I needed a character who would challenge Elsa, because that's what drives books forward. It's not dust storms. It's conflict between characters. And I sort of thought, okay, who would fight with their mother or with another person during all of this adversity? And I thought, an adolescent girl. They'll fight with you over a hairbrush no matter what's going on. And like you said, Loretta's arc is very much about the idea that I think a lot of us carry around with us in our lives, which is that we failed to understand our mothers when we were young, and we assumed we knew who they were. And, as we age and as we go through things, we begin to see our mother through different eyes. And I really wanted that journey, for Loretta, because they're so together. Because as Elsa has to become someone else for Loreda, Loreda has to learn to see who her mother really is.
And I think, and I'm sure you get this from your writing, but also as a reader, somebody who loves books, diving into that helps you a lot sort of see past yourself, because as you explore other people's mother-daughter relationships, you realize how we grow up thinking our own moms are two-dimensional and exist only as an extension of someone in service, to ourselves. And I find myself saying that to my son, who's just turned 9 years old. Like, I don't exist just to be in service of you and picking up your stuff and bringing you things. I actually exist outside this space. And you can tell he's looking at me like, what the heck are you talking about? But it can take a lifetime to sort of have that wake up call. There were moments that I mean, there's so many moments that stand out from this book, and it's such a beautiful journey. But the friendship that Elsa is able to make with the other mother who is there living in the camp, and that bond that they have, and that she kind of they tap into sort of fighting for each other. That to me was a really important relationship for Elsa.
It was for me as well. I mean, if you look back at my body of work, actually, female relationships are just so important to me. And I like to explore them and elevate them and remind people constantly how much our girlfriends matter. And, Elsa had such a difficult time, and we had never seen her have a friend. And I just believe that there's a sentence in the book, something about where Elsa had never known how one friend and one moment could keep you standing when you felt weak, or something like that. And to me, that was just critical, that Elsa fall in love, that Elsa make a friend, that Elsa sort of came into the fullest sense of herself. And Jean, her friend, was really good about saying to her over and over again, you don't see yourself as we see you. You need to, own who you really are. And I think that's that mirror that a good friend holds up is something we all need.
Couldn't agree more. And it was just so powerful, and just that they did deserve to have a gin martini and dance, and I wanted that for them very badly. Thinking about the sisters in the Nightingale, I imagine those two, and of course now we're starting to put faces to the concepts of now that we know the movie's coming out. But you think of beautiful women. The descriptions of Elsa and a lot of talk and conversation, and part of how she's treated is defined by her being unattractive. Is she really unattractive, or was her family just particularly cruel and then she just ingested it and can't ever see past?
That was my take. My take was that she was not unattractive. I mean, nobody ever says that to her. We never get that impression from any other character. Obviously, Rafe is attracted to her. I mean, I think that the way I imagined her was tall and ungainly. And I think it's really difficult, to be a 6 foot tall, very, very thin woman. I think, that's a difficult dynamic. And so I thought it was much more that she was told that she was unattractive and believed that.
She has a moment, and this really brought tears to my eyes, and a few of our book club readers also mentioned it, when they go to a beauty salon and has a kind of a splurge moment, and she's anticipating rejection, and she really needs this moment for her daughter. And it becomes something very important for herself and for her daughter. And it's just seeing this little act of kindness that as a reader, you sort of zoom in on the importance of empathy, and in the chaos of the depression and everything that they're going through, how one relatively small gesture can make the world of difference.
Yeah, I thought that was a really important moment in the book, and it's one of my favorite scenes. And I think that as we, look at the world the way it is now, and the way we're living, and the parallels between what was happening in the Great Depression and now, I always think it's important to just remind people how much kindness matters, and how much a small act of kindness can save someone's life, because you don't know, what other people are going through. And then you mentioned empathy, which I think is one of the great gifts of fiction. Is, I am able to write this story and sort of synthesize all of this research, and if I'm doing my job, make it feel real. And it allows you as the reader, to step into someone's life and to understand what it feels like, to be treated poorly, to be discriminated against, whatever it is. And I think that when you see things differently and you feel empathy for others, I think it changes how you see the world and how you act within it.
Oh, no doubt about it. We're talking about the ugly cry, and then that you're speaking of ugly, that your books can evoke, and it's cathartic, and it's freeing. It can be awkward depending on where you're finishing up your books. I mean, It just depends. What has your experience been with providing others with the ugly cry? Does anybody ever get frustrated and say, like, stop doing this to me, Kristin Hannah? Can't you throw me a happy ending, little magic fairy dust? Come on. Or, what conversations have you had about the weeping that you've caused around the world?
It's so funny that, when I first began to realize that was what was happening, because, I started hearing from people. And my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, this is going to kill my career. Nobody wants to cry. And so I thought, well, I should, try to rein that back in. And for whatever reason, it's part of my DNA. I hear it with happy endings all the time. That somehow they're so happy that you're crying. So I think it's just that what I do is I spend a lot of time creating really deep, really three-dimensional, really emotional characters. And I think the readers fall in love with those characters. And then I put them through very hard times, because I believe that adversity reveals character. And I think there's things that we can all learn as readers by seeing how women triumph over difficult odds. And so, I constantly say, I am not going to make people cry in this book, and I try not to. And then they cry anyway.
Well, it's sort of like a human barometer. I mean, if I'm going to watch somebody read your books start to finish and there are no tears, I'm going to keep my distance, frankly, because we're talking about a sociopath, don't you think?
Well, the good news is I don't come out all that often anymore, so you have time in between.
Well, and it had been a long time since I had shared a book with my husband, and when we first dating, we used to share books a lot. And he said, I think I'm going to read The Nightingale once we had done our book club discussion. He goes, I think I want to hear what all this fuss is about. And so he was reading it, and he was wrapping up. I knew he was going to finish on a Sunday morning. And I told our son, we need to leave Dad alone. He's going to need, some quiet time. And I actually sent him in with a little cup with a mimosa and tissues. And then he said, we're just going to leave you alone. And he was just weeping. And just to see that fresh, this is a former SWAT cop with the tears just streaming down his face, and then coming into the kitchen to discuss, and the crying to start all over again. I mean, it's an incredible bonding experience that you have. And that's what I enjoy so much about book clubbing and sharing books. So it's incredibly powerful and a great human connector that you're providing us all. So I appreciate it so much. It's so much fun to be able to share.
Oh, thank you so much. That's been one of the great gifts of this whole, not just this year, but this recent, the rise of social media is, for 20 years I wrote books and I had no idea what anyone thought. And now, of course, I know what everyone thinks. And so, it's fun to sort of see how intergenerational this is, grandmothers, mothers giving it to their daughters, giving it to their husbands, it's exciting, actually.
We did have a couple of questions from our book club members, and I just wondered, okay, so did you at any point want Elsa to be able to, and I don't want to give too much away because I know that everyone's got big TBRs and most people have read Four Winds, but did you think about a moment where she would have a kind of come to Jesus with Rafe, or some kind of full circle closure, because we're a spiteful bunch as we're reading, and so basically what we wanted was a kind of claws out like a moment.
That's interesting. I wrote that scene, of course, because, who doesn't want that? And the interesting thing about it was that by the time Elsa was strong enough on her own 2 feet to have the moment that I think people are interested in, it no longer mattered to Elsa. And I think that sort of is, the whole idea about revenge. And when you want revenge, everything is hot and it consumes you and it matters. But when you move past that into sort of forgiveness, you are a happier, more grounded person. And that was the arc I saw for her. Loretta is a different story, and maybe someday that story will be told.
I'd love to hear her story and see where she's going from there. Also, as Elsa kind of activates, right, and she becomes a voice of kind of helping against this sort of injustice that she's experiencing working in these farms, there were questions about whether she would risk as much as she did because she had her calling as a mother and to protect her children first and foremost. I understood that she would be called to sort of be her most full self and see the bigger picture of the world that she was creating and in the broader scope protecting for her children. But did you have conflict over whether she would dare to participate?
Sure. I mean, that's the same fundamental question that drove Beyond in the Nightingale. And to me, it's the question of, when you are a mother, your job is first and foremost to protect your children, to care for them, to keep them safe. And so when you find yourself in this situation of, either poverty, hardship, discrimination, whatever it is, Nazi occupation of France, I think you are put in this position of saying to yourself, at what point do I risk their lives as well? Because that is what you're doing. You are putting yourself in a position where now you are, putting things at risk, putting people at risk. And I think for me personally, and everybody has to sort of make this decision for themselves, but for me, with regard to the Four Winds, it was at what moment would I be ashamed in front of my children not to stand up for something better? I want to teach my children ultimately to fight for fairness, to care for others, to stand for justice, and, to know when to draw that line. And I really felt that Elsa got to the point where if she had taught Ant and Loretta, this is okay to be treated this way, that would have put her children on a path that was untenable to Elsa.
I love hearing you explain this. It's so amazing. I'm thinking about, we talked a lot in the group. People were struck by just the how vivid you describe the weather and the environment and the dust storms and how we were sort of at the mercy of Mother Nature, both by drought and also by floods. How do you research that, and what's your process in creating this experience?
Well, in this novel, the land and the weather are very much both character and villain. This is what they're fighting for 2/3 of the book, is trying to survive the worst that Mother Nature can throw at you. And obviously in the last 2 or 3 years with fires and tornadoes and floods, we know what this is like to have to battle against the land your house is sitting on. And so the way I research it is, it begins with generalized research. Okay, so it's the Great Depression, it's the Great Plains, it's a drought. and I get all of the sort of facts in my head, and then I really turn to memoirs of the people who lived through it. And there is really nothing in this book that didn't happen to someone during this time period. And so my job is to use my words, my big girl words, and paint this portrait for you, so that the sentence I hear most often is, I could taste the grit while I was reading this book. I needed a drink of water. And that's my job, to place you that firmly in that landscape.
Oh, that is the truth. I lived in the Texas Panhandle for 2 years, too. And so it was stirring up, driving there for the first time, growing up in Southern California. And I was like, what is this? This is flat and dusty. What is this? I didn't know that even a tumbleweed was a real thing. I thought it was like straight out of just a Western movie or cartoon. So I was very wide-eyed about that. But yeah, just you put us right there with all of the scent and the thirst and the everything. It was just remarkable. I know that you're a lawyer turned author. We don't see your characters hopping into a courtroom. So, how does your legal background inform or shape your writing?
I think it's very much sort of omnipresent. I'm a very analytical researcher. I'm a very analytical writer. I'm a very sort of dedicated, disciplined, straightforward. I'm constantly, in my opinion, making the case for what I'm trying to say. I'm very persuasive, I think, in how I describe things. And so I think that's where all the lawyer stuff comes in. And I just ultimately, I think there are so many great lawyer writers who are writing about legal injustice or legal cases or thrillers. And so I've sort of carved out, a different milieu, but I still use that training a lot. The research too.
Very persuasive in all the pages. You are definitely taking us with your character, and you're setting it up so that it's also real, and we can picture ourselves right alongside them. May I ask you, just as we wrap up, what is this experience like now that you're frequently seeing your characters being brought to film or to screen, and these stories that you're creating and people you're creating sort of get a life of their own? Is it painful? Is it like watching a teenager leave home? Is it like an outer body experience? What is it like, and how involved or uninvolved do you feel comfortable being?
It's all kind of new to me. Firefly Lane on Netflix was the first thing I've actually seen on screen, and I have different levels of involvement depending on what the process is, what it looks like, how I feel about something. In Firefly Lane, they took what I did and expanded it, sort of moved around a little. They've made it a bigger story. The whole first season was about a third of the book. And it was, I have to say, it was super fun to watch. I mean, it was just great to get to be a part of it. And the cast and crew have been so welcoming to me. And I was like everybody else, around the world, actually watching it and texting with my girlfriends, wondering what was going to happen, next.
That's funny. That's really cool to hear. I like to ask people who work in your business and are storytellers and are making us all love books so much and have something to share. What was, if you remember looking back at little Kristin, maybe the first book or books that really hooked you into stories and made you into a future writer or at least a lifelong reader?
If you read my books, The Four Winds is one, and The Great Alone is another one, that is kind of a loving tribute to books and the importance of books and the importance of libraries and the importance of reading. Elsa's journey begins because she reads The Age of Innocence, and it opens a door for her. And books have definitely been that for me. The one that I remember always, first and foremost, is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And, the wish fulfillment of this poor young boy, going out into the world and surviving and doing well for his family. The Oz books, the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, and then probably the book is Lord of the Rings. That's the one that is most, I think, defining for me. That it's the hero's journey, and I love it.
Oh, that is so great. Thank you so much. And what a great reading list for us to compile and share with the young ones in our lives who we're trying to get on the same path to enjoy the amazing journey that comes with a very good book. As we say goodbye to you and a gigantic thank you, any hints of what's coming next from Kristin Hannah, our favorite author?
I just turned in my new idea, so all I can tell you is there will be another book.
Yes.
Let's hope I can pull it off.
I know you can. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This was such a pleasure to be able to speak to you and appreciate your time so very, very much.
Thank you. This was really great. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, after an amazing conversation with Kristin Hannah, I can't even believe it. The author of The Four Winds, if you haven't picked it up yet, and her entire catalog of books, get ready, get them all, grab your Kleenex,
yes,
and tap into the saddest moments you're going to experience in a while, but in a good way. It's cathartic. So it's time for a moment with Margaret, and we want to talk about that ugly cry that she was so surprised that people are experiencing. It's a good thing. It keeps you coming back for more as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So top of mind, let's go movie and book ugly cry.
I've got two books, though.
Yes.
I mean, one is obviously another Kristin Hannah book.
Oh, yes.
I've recommended it to you and to others. The Great Alone is, I think, aside from the Nightingale, the most of her tearjerkers of the three that I've read. I mean, just gets right to the core of you. And it's more an emotional dive into family life. So I think that one's a really good one.
What is wrong with me that I haven't read this yet? That's incredible.
You know, and I listened to it as audiobook, so it got very hard for me to stop listening to it. So I'd have to, pause and go,
breathe.
Oh no, I gotta listen to that more, and finding more opportunities for me to listen to the audiobook rather than just when I was driving.
Yes.
But okay, do you want to go with movies first or books first?
Let's do books.
Okay. My book choice on this one, I just read this last summer. I know it's a little bit behind on the times, but Me Before You by Jojo Moyes.
Oh.
That, did you ever read that book?
No, and we did Giver of Stars as a book club read,
Also
and
great.
that was the first time I read her. So also, I don't know, I'm living in some sort of a strange cave.
I think the pandemic, I had so much time on my hands, so I read 5 or 6 of her books last year, including Giver of Stars. And, Me Before You is the first of a trilogy. So it's romance, it's fiction, it's contemporary, but it's a man who, I believe he was hit by a bus or something of that. I believe it's a bus, but he was hit and then he was no longer able to move his arms and his legs. He was in a wheelchair and he went from being this thrill-seeking man, powerful business guy to somebody who couldn't have any direction in his life that was fulfilling to him, and he decided that he did not want to continue his life in that direction. And in an attempt for his family to kind of coax him out of that idea, they hired this girl to come and be like a companion and assistant somewhat. And they do not get along at first, and then they develop a friendship and more than that. And then, it's one of those books that, I won't give away the ending, but it's a book that you're not quite sure which way the ending's going to go. You see the path ahead of you, and you're like, is this going to go positively, like a happy ending, or is this going to go negatively? You have to brace yourself. So, and it did become a movie. I didn't watch the movie, but this is the first of a trilogy, so there are 2 more books after this about this relationship.
Oh, okay.
So but it'll make you cry for sure.
All right,
so
I
what
like
was yours?
that. My book is When Breath Becomes Air, Paul Kalanithi. Did you read this?
No, I'm already going to.
It's a memoir written by an incredible doctor, researcher, and also, I believe he also had a master's degree in literature and creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, he's a cancer researcher who ends up having terminal cancer himself.
Oh, wow.
And so he writes it from this perspective of going through it, but also knowing exactly what's happening to his body, knowing that there's no sugarcoating anything for him. He knows everything. So, and he's in love, and he's married, and his wife is having a baby, and it's just, I just remember flying home. We'd gone to New York, and I was reading this book, and I was finishing it on the flight.
Oh, no.
And I was sobbing and making so much noise, and I was losing my mind.
Trying to hold it back.
Oh, and my husband's like, what are we going to do? Do you need to be sedated? Like, what's happening? Because he goes, they're going to be worried about you and want to put you in a hospital. And so it just was all consuming. But it is beautiful and so unique. So I would highly recommend it. I just would say don't read it in public.
I've definitely cried on planes before, watching movies. And, you know, I don't typically pick movies that are going to make me cry on a plane, but been there and done that, and you're like trying to hide from people.
Yeah. Well, when you're gasping for breath and making a lot of noise, it starts to get a little much.
Like the mask is going to drop from
seriously, like
just to help you, just at your seat.
Yes, like either bring her more booze or cut her off. I can't decide which. Okay, so my movie would be Stepmom, Julia Roberts, Susan Sarandon. Of course, there's an illness theme going on here, but that movie gets me every time. And it can even be the kind on TBS with the commercials, and you're only watching for like 45 seconds, and there's another commercial. It just gets me because these two women are so good. And this photograph that she gives her, the Christmas gift, it's just, I mean, you need to get it out, watch that movie.
I think it's also so realistic about a fight between, not a fight, but, you know, the squaring off of the power of the women in your children's lives. And, you know, having this person, this younger person kind of stepping into the role that is yours, and you're not able to fulfill it in the same way because of an illness.
It's gutting.
I mean, totally gutting. And especially if you know someone who is a stepmom or acts as a stepmom and seeing the struggles that they go through, it's even more relatable. And it's funny because I didn't think about this, but your movie has Julia Roberts and my movie has Julia Roberts. I didn't think about that. Mine is Steel Magnolias.
Oh, good one.
Which, I mean, it's got a little bit of everything, but first and foremost, Dolly Parton. And Sally Field, who's an incredible actress, but Julia Roberts in her role is just, it's so heartbreaking to watch the development of that family and her just pushing through an illness, you know, interestingly enough, and trying to do what is best for her and her family versus what her parents want from her. And talk about female friendships. I mean,
my gosh,
that is a core four right there.
It is incredible. That movie's got all of it, and it's
Lush
one of those
bashful.
Lush and bashful. And it's one of those movies that I think you probably can reappreciate in whatever phase you're in or whatever. It's. I think you could watch it time and time again and get something else out of it or identify with a different one of the women.
Absolutely, I think. And Dolly Parton, timeless.
Yes.
That lady. And Sally Field also.
And Olympia Dukakis.
Yes.
Is that passed away? Rest in peace.
Oh, I know. That was just this weekend.
Yeah, no ugly crying.
Yes.
No ugly crying.
I don't want that. I think we've done enough.
Yes, take off your makeup before you ugly cry, because otherwise it is very difficult. Margaret, thank you so much.
Of course.
Last check, how many books are you so far this year?
I'm at 37 still. However, I am completing about 3 this week.
Yeah, so don't hold us to that number. It'll be different by the time you listen to this podcast. But that is it for now. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. Please share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a good review if you didn't hate what you heard. And you can follow us on social media too. And if you have a book recommendation, we want to hear it. So it's Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com. You can send us an email or even like a voice memo. That would be kind of cool. Or you can find me on Facebook, Olivia Fierro, or Olivia's Book Club is the Facebook group where we're always talking about books. So that is awesome. It's a really great community that continues to grow. We'd love to see you and hear you there. Also Instagram, Olivia Fierro or olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is on Instagram at Overbooked and Overdue.
Both, always.
Both on
right
that
now.
Note, peace out.
Bye.
Until next time, keep reading. Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. Our editor is Nick Sanchez. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.